into the design process at early and ongoing stages. And this is what the Council of Stellar Management tries to do. They want to think less about reactive forms of feedback. So instead of petitioning different kinds of things to be moved up the prioritization in the backlog, instead of trying to react to player dissatisfaction, what they want to do more and more of is get into the process in that schematic chart early on, to bounce ideas, to have brainstorming sessions, and to be privy to kinds of information that because of NDA would not be revealed to the rest of the player base. Right. And a final person, a game scholar, that I would like to bring into this conversation would be Casey O'Donnell. So Casey O'Donnell talks about feedback technologies, about a game. If you really think about it, I mean, all it is a kind of surveillant enclosure, right? It is designed to always already be surveilling players, to be surveilling users, because what it does is that it responds to actions that you have in the game with pleasurable feedback, with feedback that's meant to engage you. Right? And this comes in a long line of scholars who have talked about feedback technologies. One of them is Nick Dyer-Witheford, who's kind of imagined closing the feedback loop as well, but thinking specifically about how games in particular, because they have this kind of architecture, are well poised to do that kind of work. Right? Okay, so let me move on to thinking about EVE Online and how this communication circulates through the co-creative system. Right, so I started off thinking about all these different conversations, right? There's stuff going on in the forums, people are posting, people are discussing, they're voting for their council members, right? There's also a lot of stuff going on in the game. Every time a player does something, right, whether it's buying something, whether it's doing something in the game, shooting someone up, right? It's all information that's been circulated that the developers are using in some way. So this is the first stage of my thinking, right? And I decided to move on into thinking about the choke points in this kind of system. And it's not just circulating freely and wildly. Instead, all of it in some way is moving towards developers, right? Developers are interpreting all these different, you will signals, all these different pieces of information, and using them in the iterative design process. So we have forums, we have fan sites, they're taking the temperature of fan sites, they're doing sentiment analysis on the forums. And council members are also flagging specific forum threads as our community managers in order to bring that to developers' attention. Okay. So as I started to look more and more at the meeting minutes, which was my main form of analysis for the summer, I started to notice that instead of just bringing up phenomenological kinds of feedback, so for example, flagging threads in the forum, or bringing up conversations that they've had over email or in person at conventions, what council members were doing a lot of was they were contextualizing and evaluating different kinds of metrics. They were evaluating and contextualizing different kinds of game analytics, right? And they were really thinking about it in different kinds of ways, instead of just using the analytics to sort of disqualify different kinds of phenomenological feedback, right? They would really have a conversation about it. They would ask developers, okay, so is this a simple or a complex metric, right? Is this really an objective measure that you have, right? Is it actionable for your game design, right? Is it informed? Is it well designed? And developers would turn around and say, okay, when we iterate on our game, we don't only look at these metrics, we also listen to the community. Okay? So instead of that first schematic where you see a lot of different jumbled up conversations going on, right? I realized that the first schematic in which you see that flow down the line of development, right, is really what they're aiming towards. So we see here there's a kind of contextualization process in which every agenda item at these summits, right, they go through a process in which either a developer brings up analytics or a player brings up kind of player complaint, or the council, brings up some kind of phenomenological feedback. They contextualize it, right? They think about the proposed adjustments, right? Sometimes it leads to brainstorming or sanity checking. And to the extent that the meeting minutes that I've analyzed, right, are transparent, and of course they are not. all parties involved are under NDA, and even when certain things are redacted from the record, they are not indicated in any way. So the kinds of analytics that I've seen in the meeting minutes and that I'll present to you later on are a version of a kind of story that, is a performative document, in other words. So the council will always encourage developers to bring up any kinds of proposed adjustments that they have decided on in terms of their analytics, bring it to the public. So publish a dev blog and let the players discuss and then move on from there. Okay, so here's the outline of my talk for today. All right. As promised, I'm going to talk about that circulation, aggregation, and evaluation of player communication. Right? And the argument that I want to make is that players use the frame of transmission to make their utterances, to make their choices, and to make their traces legible to consumer research. Right? Democratic representation, which is what the council is sort of touted as. And some players, they're like, oh, it's just PR stunt. Some players are like, yeah, but at least it makes me feel better. It's not really about democracy as we think about it. It's not really about that kind of rights discourse. Instead, I want to argue that democratic representation is seen as an information filtration mechanism to close the feedback loop, or the proverbial feedback loop. Right? And then I'm going to spend more time thinking about player constitution. So players understand themselves as a social composite. Like you saw the org chart of EVE Online, there's so many different kinds of play styles, right? There's a dissonance there. And what these players seem to be doing, right? And again, I'm using players, or I'm using the council members as a proxy for what players seem to think, right? They seek a kind of algorithmic self-reflexivity. They need those analytics in order to understand themselves as a public, right? And they need that to contextualize public discourse and democratic representation. And it often happens in uneven and ambivalent ways. All right, so those are 2 points that I want to argue for, and I also want to open up the floor to discussion. This is a work in progress after all, and I'm still working through some issues, thinking about representativeness. So this council, you can already tell it draws from different networks of meaning, right? Some of it is political, it's rights-based. Some of it is managerial, it's based on efficiency and effectiveness, and some of it is cybernetic, right, in terms of scientific objectivity. And these kinds of evidentiary logics, what they do is that they sort of, they collude, but at the same time they compete with each other, right? And players seem to imagine channels of control that are navigated by their feedback, but only feedback that is somehow made legible, made legitimate to game development, okay, through these kinds of competing claims to representativeness. I'm going to skip through these discussion points. We'll come to it later on. So I've already talked a bit about my methodology. So there were 7 years of meeting minutes, and I've qualitatively analyzed them. And if you want to talk more about this process, we can catch up after the talk. And let me skip to my arguments. Okay, so communication and transmission. Those of you here who are communication scholars, this will be Communication 101, right? And 2 of my favorite authors would be, Peters and James Carey, have talked about a kind of conduit metaphor of thinking about communication. Instead of the exchange of meaning, what it is the exchange of packets of information from point A to point B, right? And warning, I'm going to present to you a couple of quotes. So the council sees their role as in terms of filtration, in terms of filtering the transmission from point A to point B. Okay? And here's a quote by a council member who talks about how he's trying to filter the signal, right, by flagging different kinds of threads, but the noise is still there. So he's cutting it down for other members of the council because they can't read everything in the forums. And then that flagging is going to be escalated after some discussion to developers. Okay. All right, so another kind of filtration has to do with deliberation, or deliberation of these council members. So here we have a conversation in which the head of product development is sort of, she's sort of prefacing the fact that, okay, I'm here at the meeting, but if you want me to pay attention to something, you really have to email me. I'm not going to notice it in the forums. I'm not going to notice it, in your Skype channels. And then a council member comes in and asks, okay, but should I escalate everything, or are there only certain things that that you might be interested in? How do I make that? How do I discern what should be escalated and what should not? What I should filter and what I should not? And he also mentioned they don't use old methods of consensus anymore. What they used to do at the beginning of the history of the council is that they used to vote on agenda items. And those only certain agenda items that the majority had voted on would be discussed at these summits. Okay? And the product developer says, comes back and says, for reasons of sanity, because she can't read everything, she would prefer if there was some deliberation by the group beforehand. Okay? And the community manager or the project manager for the council members said that certain things are seagull level, or certain things should be escalated. Well, the rest, if you're not sure, come to me first, and I can be the filtration mechanism for that. Okay. So another way to think about the transmission view of communication is through weighted filtration. So the democratic representation system that they have, what it does is that it gives more weight. And this is a kind of, it's not exactly codified. All of the council members have the same, they have the same rights, they have the same roles. There's a chairman and a secretary, but beyond that, everybody has an